All right, guys, we are live. Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. I am super excited to do another interview. This is the second time that we've done one of these crowdcasts, Mike. And for those of you that don't know, Mike, could you just give us a brief intro on what you do and what your background is as it relates to sales, marketing, property management?
Sure. Well, on a personal side, this is like going on year 28 in the real estate business. I've been a real estate broker. I've done property management myself, which eventually led into a business with my son, which is called Geek Real Estate Marketing. We generate leads for property management companies, and what makes us different primarily is that we offer exclusive leads that are not shared with anybody else.
Fantastic. Okay, so you've done the practitioner side of things. You've got some background with sales and marketing. And the reason that I wanted to talk to you today was to really focus on specific strategies for small businesses that are interested in leveraging the things that they typically view as weaknesses and turning them into assets. When we look at kind of the overall scope of property management businesses, you have some firms that are above 1,000 doors managing single-family residential, but the broad cross-section of the market, the biggest cross-section of the market is going to be managing probably less than 100 doors, but kind of the section that we're targeting on helping today are folks that are managing somewhere between 50 and 200 doors, let's say. They're early, they're small, they're wanting to get some strategic advantages, but they don't have cash to use as a crutch to lean on, so they need to be scrappy, they need to be smart, they need to be creative. And what I wanted to talk to you about was how we can see some metaphors from history, from sports, for just basic kind of underdog strategies that these types of folks can use. So first off, can you relate, of the businesses that you help, where do people fit? Are you mostly helping larger size property management companies in your practice? Who do you help day to day?
I would say, starting with the category you just described, lower end would be 100 to 200 doors, and then we go up to the 1,000 door type of operations. And so, yeah, I mean, we deal on there. We don't as much deal with people at the low end because our service costs money, and if they really are at a point where they have more time than money, I have people approach me, and I generally say, we're maybe not the best fit, and maybe you ought to come back at a different time. When somebody comes to me with $100 a month lead generation budget, that's not going to be a very good relationship with us, and so I try to point them in different directions. So I'm happy to try to give you my best insights as to what I would do to get up to that point where you could afford to outsource some of that.
Yeah, so what is the free advice for that person that says, I got $100, you say that's not going to get you any far. If this guy persists and you're willing to give him some insights on how to bridge the gap, what would you tell somebody in that position?
Well, the first thing I would say is, as far as entrepreneurial resources, you've either got time or money. If you don't have either one, then I'm questioning what you're doing, actually, because if you've got a business that's earning some money, then you can afford to take some of that and outsource it and kind of get more money back. But at the beginning, if you're hustling, you're counting on your time. And so I would use that to your advantage. The first thing I would probably do, though, is I would probably spend some of that time thinking and trying to make sure that I carved off a piece of the market a piece of territory that I could actually defend and would be actually different. I think a big mistake would be to go in the market and say, hey, here's what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do that too, and I'm just going to be smaller and less well financed. That doesn't seem like a very good strategy to me. We got a book. You could read the book if you wanted. We talk about being a purple cow versus a brown cow. And if you're a brown cow and you don't have a lot of money and you're small, you're going to get slaughtered. I mean, you're a hamburger. That's the bottom line. So you're going to have to do something a little bit different. So I would start off with the thinking process first and make sure that there was a clear difference in the marketplace of something I was bringing. And there's a lot of different ways you could do that.
So the point here, though, is that a follower strategy of saying, let me see what the bigger companies are doing and try and copy that, that's a fatally flawed strategy as a new entrant.
It's a disaster. You're going to get your lunch. I mean, they feed off your carcass, the bigger companies, if you do that sort of thing.
Okay, so what should they do?
Well, I mean, obviously thinking first. That doesn't cost, it just takes a little bit of time. It takes some money and some effort. And it's surprising how many larger companies don't do that much thinking, in my experience. So you can have a huge strategic advantage if you'll spend some time and be tight in your thinking and how you view your business, know exactly what makes you different, be able to explain, especially to the prospect, what makes you different and more desirable. You know, it seems obvious, but lots of people jump that obvious step. And so having a clear idea and being able to look at that person across the table or online across virtual table and be able to say, yeah, you know, I know that Renter's Warehouse is huge, or the RPM franchises are huge, or whatever, but here's what makes me different and why you might want to consider me in that circumstance. So that would be one thing I would do. Another thing I would do that is really simply just elbow grease is I would make sure that my review profile was stellar, because people do care. And a lot of larger companies, I mean, the really large ones get it and they really go after it hard. You are, however, going to get slaughtered as a small company if your review profile, if you're already a little shaky, they don't know who you are, and then they check your reviews and you have 0 reviews, you're done.
Okay, so with reviews, you have 2 opportunities here. The first is the percentage of your customers that leave a review. That's a metric that you can move the needle on if you're aggressive about soliciting those reviews. And the other is simply offering a better quality service to generate more 5-star reviews, right? Because when we think about how we would weight 1,000 reviews that on average are at 3.5 stars versus 20 reviews at 5 stars, even though way more effort has been put into accruing the 1,000 reviews, those 20 reviews at a 5-star level can actually have a can be meaningfully competitive, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, especially when you have a small number of reviews, anything that you do can really move the needle. I agree, just on a numbers, from a numbers perspective. So that makes complete sense. I mean, you have to realize that one of the things you've got going for you is hustle. I mean, you can out hustle your other competitors. And I used to say to people, you know, who would you refer this real estate client to? And I'd say, well, I'd either go with the best person in the market, or I would go with somebody brand new, not somebody in between. Because the person's experience got there for a reason. The person who's brand new is trying to prove themselves, and they're going to hustle. And so that's got to be one of your strategic advantages, is that you're going to connect with this customer. You're going to take really good care with them. And one of the things we talk about here at Geek is to do things that don't scale. So, you know, write a handwritten thank you note and go over and visit and give them cookies. And it's like, well, gosh, if I have 500 doors, I can't do that. Well, you don't have 500 doors, so you can't do it. And the big guy can't do that. And so then you're going to get some good reviews and they're going to rave about you. That's a good way to build a business. Just good old-fashioned hard work and service.
Doing things that don't scale. Love that. That's actually a reference to an article written by Paul Graham. I just dropped the link in the chat. Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator. It's a startup incubator. These are companies that are taking on a tiny little bit of capital, trying to grow and flesh out a proof of concept within a very intense 3-month time of focusing, and then really scale more so after they've kind of perfected the formula, take on more capital. But the basic idea with doing things that don't scale is twofold. First off, you learn things. When you put your hands deeply into the problem at the deepest level, it informs your thinking about the scalable strategies, systems, and processes. Additionally, that early traction that you have to get, whatever you have to do to get initial traction, is worth it. Beg, borrow, steal initially. So while these things may not be desirable in the long run, it makes all the difference early. And the people that are unwilling to do that kind of work, it may be kind of a it may be an indicator that they're not going to last in the long haul.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of famous stories. Stripe, which is a credit card processor, the early founders there, they would go to somebody's house and install Stripe on their computer. I mean, that's nuts. Airbnb has another famous story like that. They would go and stage the houses. They'd go there and hustle from house to house. You think, that's crazy. Well, yeah, it is crazy. It's crazy like a fox, because then they get face to face with the problems that maybe the guy who's got 500,000 doors is too busy to pay attention to. He's maybe lost track of the marketplace. And you can, nothing like being belly to belly with the real customer to learn about, like, well, gosh, there's something that people are talking about. I wonder if I could be different by doing X.
And the beauty about it is that if you find something that doesn't scale that works, then maybe you can find a way to scale it. Like, for example, with the handwritten letters, getting something in the mail, snail mail, it just stands out in a huge way right now. So if that moves the needle for your business, and I'm guessing for most people it probably would, then find a way to scale it. Like, for example, Mailift or all of these services that will send out a handwritten mail for you, handwritten letter for you.
Well, I think, in fact, I think I might be getting the company on, but I think it was MailChimp that started out writing handwritten thank yous to everybody that signed up for an online business, which, I mean, that made them stand out for sure. And one of their complaints was initially on, I think they were getting advice from somebody it might have even been Paul Graham, I don't know. But anyway, it was like, well, this doesn't scale. And it's like, well, yeah, it doesn't, but you're not at that position. And number two, you'd be surprised at what scales.
Yeah,
I mean, what you're saying is, does customer care and knowledge of who your customer is not scale? Well, I mean, that's what you're really buying there more than, I mean, you're really trying to make sure that you've got this this match where you really understand what the customer's problem is, and you really got a solution that scratches that itch. That, I mean, ultimately, scaling is irrelevant if you don't have that part of the formula down. And they're just saying, dig in.
So this is one of the problems with walking into a niche that has clearly defined inertia, expectations about what is normal. What is normal for real estate agents? What is normal for plumbing companies? What is normal for property managers? It's so easy to be anchored in a negative normal, particularly if you're jumping from having been in the industry and now jumping out on your own, as opposed to new market entrants that take none of those things about they're not either invested in the status quo, and they're not even fully informed of the status quo. So for them, it's open season on it to be able to just, you know, start from scratch and see what works.
Yeah, I mean, some of the customers we've had that have come in from outside the industry, because the disastrous real estate market of 2008, 2009 blew in a lot of people from a lot of places, because you could kind of walk down the street and pick up property management agreements because everybody had to rent. And some of these people came from outside the industry, and some of the smartest people that we interact with have almost no property management experience, because they just came in as kind of a dumb guy and just said, hey, I'm learning brand new with brand new eyes and brand new ears. And it's remarkable what you can do if you take that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing the same thing. I talked to a guy yesterday that had a Goldman Sachs background. I talked to somebody a couple weeks ago that was doing playwriting and then jumped to hospitality and then jumped to UX design and then jump to property management. It's like there's not a linear path, and sometimes not having those default assumptions really becomes an advantage. Let's talk about other advantages. What are other points of leverage for a small business that doesn't have a ton of cash? You mentioned you know, this right here. You mentioned reviews. What other things would you put on that list?
Well, I mean, to me, it might vary market by market, but if you really dig in with the customer, you might find things that larger companies have a harder time reacting to, because every advantage has a disadvantage. There's always a flip side. There's no such thing as, oh, we've only got upside. If you're big, it means you can't move as fast, almost always.
Sure.
If you're small, yeah, you're undercapitalized relative to the big guy, but you also may have some other kind of guerrilla benefits where you can move more quickly. You can just, well, shoot, that didn't work, we'll just drop it and move over here. There's only 2 of us, so we can move fast. As opposed to, well, shoot, we've got 25 employees. I'll call a staff meeting and we'll whiteboard it and talk about something the next 5 months. You know, I mean, we take pride in at Geek. We can turn an idea around in a week and, you know, implement it literally inside of a month. And some larger companies, they literally just can't do that. So that's an advantage.
And so why is that? So for those larger organic companies, it's easy to say, you know, they're stodgy and they just move slow, just the size metaphor. But there are specific reasons, right? One of those is the number of people involved. Trying to make decisions by committee, it's a horrible idea. Another is risk mitigation, right? There's a much bigger mental cognitive cost associated with a mistake and making a loss in a larger organization. The bigger you get, protecting your base of what you have, you know, I assume those are the sorts of things you're talking about.
Yeah, no, and it's a great point that you make, and I'll just emphasize that I mean, at the beginning, if you got 50 doors, what do you got to lose? I mean, really, if you've got 500 or 1,000 doors, you actually have something to lose. So you better think about things a little bit more differently. Mm-hmm. But boy, if you could try something, if somebody says, well, God, that was the dumbest thing ever. All right, you lost a few customers.
Yeah, so what?
Okay. You know, oh, we picked the wrong business name and we thought we were going to be the most amazing thing in XYZ. It's like, it all flopped. Okay, well, new business name, starting something new next month. I know, I mean, I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying you can't do that if you've got 500 or 1,000 doors much as easily as you can if you have 10. Or
well, the flip side of that, though, is that if you're at 1,000 doors and you're making a mistake, the impact would be bigger, but counterintuitively, that would not result in more quickly correcting it, right? As a larger organization, the ego aspect, the willingness to admit a mistake and own that with the entire organization can sometimes make you double down and entrench in a mistake that a smaller organization can just be more honest and say, oh yeah, that was a horrible decision, we screwed up, just stop doing it, let's start over.
Sure. Well, one other thing I would add is that the smaller your organization is, the more you really feel the pain of gaining or losing a single client, the more that, you know, that actually pays your bills. And so you're a lot more in tune with your day-to-day numbers. One of the things I've observed as organizations get larger is they tend to lose track just by sheer volume of, you're just buried in numbers, you're buried in transactions, you're buried with to-dos. They all, you know, if you were to look at each one in a siloed way, yeah, I can handle that. But the larger you get, you're stacking all those things on top of each other. So it's not a matter of that these people don't have a heart to serve or don't want to do a good job. It's just the sheer volume. And the more things you've got going, the more things are going to break. That's just Murphy's Law in real life. So the smaller you are, the more you're able to actually be in touch with those numbers and really understand which things move, which things, which way. And the larger you are, it can take longer to respond, I guess is what I'm saying. You might not figure out that you have a problem until later. Like, I'll give you an illustration in our own business. Like when we're managing one AdWords account and our bidding strategy is wrong, and so we're off, we notice, like we can notice right that day. On the other hand, when we're managing tens of thousands, which campaign's wrong? That's harder. That's a lot harder. There's a lot more noise in the system to be able to figure out. And so you have to work really, really hard at noticing what's going on. And so you do have an advantage as a smaller company, being more in touch with your issues and being able to react to problems and self-correct maybe faster than a larger organization, just intrinsically because of the size of the organization and the noise involved.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. Just going to make a follow-up point on that I'm forgetting. Well, had a brain fart. We'll just keep moving here. Yeah, so I'm totally with you on that, and those challenges are definitely real. Here's what it was. So when you talk about the scaling challenges, one thing that I think about is knowing where you want to go, owning and making a decision of what is my end goal, what is my finish line. Am I trying to exit? Am I trying to get to a certain lifestyle achievement? And in both cases, what is a sufficiently large exit? How long should it take? What is a sufficiently large target in terms of lifestyle business? And the reason that that is helpful is not only does it anchor, you know, your day-to-day long-term goals, planning strategy, but it also early on, it allows you to own a very important decision. And that is, if you want to have a successful and effective and an enjoyable lifestyle business, then the hiring decisions, the systems and the process decisions that you make would look radically different. And within the first couple years of running the business, you kind of run into this situation where if you're choosing the lifestyle, then you can really buckle down and optimize for that. But if you're kind of sort of in between, you can tend to make some half-hearted decisions that kind of look like growing and scaling an organization, but you're not necessarily fully in alignment with that objective. Would you say that making the clear decision about the end game is kind of always going to be a near-term driver of success or failure for smaller businesses?
Well, I mean, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of somebody that has 20 or 50 or 100 doors. I mean, you're a small business person. You're a solopreneur. You're not like, so my suspicion would be that you're more concerned about, gosh, am I going to be able to pay the bills 2 months from now? And I'm still going to be around a year from now. I mean, I'm not trying to cast some doubt on it, but I'm just saying when you're at that level, that's not a lot of revenue coming in. That's not a sizable business in terms of the property management industry. And so my focus at that point, I think knowing whether you want a lifestyle business or you have some other end game, I think is important. So that answers your question. Mm-hmm. I would say also though, I would focus as a small company on first making sure that I have nailed that I'm solving a problem the customer really wants to solve, which I can do by just digging into my customers and really understanding them. And then then making sure that I can make this thing work at a very small scale. Like in a small, can I make 50 doors profitable? Can I get my systems in place to make that work? Because there's no point in having 500 doors if at 50 doors you were unprofitable. You can't multiply zeros, and if it's not working at 50, it's probably not. People always say, oh, I'm going to get it scale, and it's all going to work out. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe you're just going to have bigger pressure and still your margins will be thin. I mean, there's exceptions to that. If you do huge volume, a very thin margin can make it work. But I think you're better off targeting and making sure that at a small scale your business really works. And then like, okay, it works in this part of the city. Let's expand it to this part of the city. It works with 2 employees. Okay, I'm going to add another property manager so we can do 3 of them. We can then buy some leads then at that point and that sort of thing.
So you're nimble, you're agile, and this is another huge point of leverage for the smaller businesses. One of these intangible things that's free, but that matters, and that is speed and the ability to move quickly. And that manifests itself in both decision-making as well as things like response time, right? For me, when I get a new sales lead that comes in, I am euphoric if I see that came in within the last 30 seconds or so, because I know that if I call that person immediately, I've got that wow factor. The decay rate on that is really high. If you call somebody back in an hour, some people feel like that's quick, but in reality, you're just doing your job. If you call somebody back in 6 hours the next day, now you're kind of behind the competition. So speed is a really big thing overall, and again, it's free. It doesn't cost anything. But when we kind of draw in some metaphors from history, we see the same things with battles. This David versus Goliath. History tells us that smaller forces that are able to move quickly have a meaningful point of leverage, because what they're leveraging is speed and time, not necessarily hitting power. And what that means is that the strategies that they can afford to leverage are they're simply opened up. I mean, as you look back and you think about from history, are there any battles or any historical context that you would say kind of informs that conversation?
We're going to drop some historical knowledge on people. Is that what you're telling me?
Hey, it's a really, I mean, this is not kitschy stuff, guys. This directly applies person to person combat. I mean, drop some knowledge on me, Mike.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm a geek for some of this stuff. Obviously, you already referred to David and Goliath. I mean, one of the things, it's also a book written by Gladwell, which is, it's a good read. I like it. And I think the takeaway from that story is that David got good at little things. I mean, the reason he was ready for his moment is that he was killing animals that were coming to attack his flock. So he learned how to throw a rock just as a kid. We call this the wombat factor here at Geek. I don't know if you've ever watched Star Wars, and Luke gets to his point in episode 4 where they're going to blow up the Death Star, and he's going to go in there and he's going to go down there, and you want him to get right in the little hole, right? The little video game kind of thing where he shoots it. You know that scene, right?
Yeah.
Scene.
Yeah.
Well, everybody said, well, can you do it? And he says, oh yeah, this is just like shooting wombats out when I was a kid, right? And so the idea is that you develop these skills at a very small level that then can scale up. So historically speaking, David had the skill set because he didn't despise his early beginnings, like, this is crappy. I mean, I'll give you an example. In our own business, we have tried to solve our clients' missed calls, and so we have had them bounce back to us. I've been answering the phone myself personally for our clients in some situations for months to try to learn and interact with clients and try to understand. Is that scalable? Well, I don't want to be doing it in 10 years, but I'll tell you what, I've learned a ton doing it. I developed a lot of skill being able to understand what their issues are and what the problems are. So I think, so David comes in with that skill set, but he also didn't fight Goliath's fight. I mean, Goliath had a big sword, he had a chest of armor, he was huge, and everybody knew he was going to lose, that David was going to lose. David tried to play his game initially by dressing up in Saul's armor, right? He was going to walk out there in the battlefield, and it was all clunky. He basically said, screw this. This doesn't work for me. And he just walked out there basically with a slingshot and a couple of rocks, just like he used to do with the wild animals protecting his sheep. And he was confident because he knew his game. He knew what he could do. And everybody was laughing at him, and all he took was, he just took his little thing and whack, and that's all it took. And so tying this back to property management companies, you kind of got to, you develop your skills at a small level, and then you got to figure out, well, what are the big guys doing, and what can I do that's different than them that doesn't make me play their game? So,
yes, well said.
You know, so if their game is like, I'll pick on Renters Warehouse because it's top of mind for a lot of people. They've got a structured fee system that's very, it's very low price, and they deal with that. Well, okay, that's one way to do it. There's also people, not everybody wants the lowest price though. I mean, you might think that, but that's not true. There's people that want more care and more concern, and they value other things. And so figure out what those things are, serve the crap out of those people, and you might have an advantage. If you try to play against a Renters Warehouse, against their game, oh, I'm going to go buy $15 worth of radio advertising. I wish you luck. You're going to get killed. So you better figure out another way to do that. And so play a different game, I guess, is what I'm going to suggest to you. I'm not sure what that is. It varies by circumstance, but that's how I'd be looking at it.
Well, let's talk. I love this. This is the key or the nut of what we're talking about. Follower strategy versus leader strategy. Follower strategy says, this is where I want to get. This is what the person there is doing. So what I'm going to do is scale down, kind of smaller mirror image of that. That's follower strategy. That's saying they're doing a bunch of radio ads. I'm going to find a way to do radio ads. They're doing all property management. I'm going to do all property management. Leader strategy says, I'm going to leverage the thing that works for me in context. So that means they have 1,000 reviews, but it's kind of mediocre. I'm not going to have 1,000 reviews anytime soon, but I'm going to make sure that every single one that I get is going to be as good as it can possibly be. They're doing all property management, but I know that like every other company, they're just processing the leads. They're relying on the fact, they're getting lazy by virtue of the fact that they're being handed these leads. And as anytime you're being just kind of handed something on a silver platter and you don't really feel the full pain of doing it on your own, there can be a little bit of an entitlement philosophy. There's a lack of proper sales training for most of these small businesses. So they take that APM lead or the lead from wherever they got it, they call the person back, they send an explanation of their services, and that's it, right? That's the sales process, as opposed to saying, I'm going to, I'll let you get there. I know you got some things to say about that, but as opposed to saying, I am going to lead off with sales culture. I'm going to think of myself as a sales organization. And that means that dollar for dollar, the return that I get wherever I put my money, even if it is with an inefficient lead source, the return is going to be higher because I will steward the lead better with a better process, with a better systems as it relates to follow-up, nurturing, etc. That is the type of David type strategy where you're instead of saying it's about being big, strong, and blunt force trauma, you're saying, no, I'm gonna work the sling. I'm gonna find out what the sling is. I'm gonna get good at it, and that's what I'm gonna lead on. And I'm not gonna fight the battles that I know I'm going to lose. I know you got some things to say about the sales process.
You're totally baiting me.
This is what I'm doing, Mike. I'm winding you up.
You just push the button and it's out gonna come. Okay, so this is another way where a small company can have a huge advantage. I mean, any company can do this. I'm just saying a lot of companies aren't doing this. And that is, you use the word sales culture. I think it's an identity thing. If you can view yourself as a small company and saying, I am first a sales organization, then my job is to create a customer. That's what I do. And so I don't just answer the phone and send people information. You can't deposit that at Wells Fargo. That's not how it works. And so you've actually got to close management agreements. And so let me just give you a simple, I'm going to make this a kind of a simple, dumb example, but let's imagine that you can get 10 leads for $1,000. And you probably can in the property management industry from a variety of sources. So let's forget about the source for just a second. So you've got 10 leads. And let's say that you are doing, I don't know, the average job. The average job probably means you're closing about 1 out of 10, roughly, with a lot of leads. And well, gee, let's see. That's one management agreement costs you $1,000. Can you make money doing that? Yeah, maybe. It's not easy though. It's tough. You better have some other things mixed into the cake to make that work. Most property managers are going to get nervous that they're paying $1,000 an agreement. On the other hand, let's imagine you take those same leads and now you're closing, oh, I don't know, out of 10. Now, automatically, you're paying $500 an agreement. Let's imagine that you get really serious and you close 3 out of 10. Now you're paying between $3 and $350 per management agreement. That changes everything. Mm-hmm. You can take the same amount of dirt and turn it into something magical, right? As somebody else. And so you could literally do exactly the same thing as everybody else, but you're just more efficient behind the scenes processing the lead. That gives you a competitive advantage that people can't even figure out. Like, how are they're doing exactly the same thing as us, but they're flourishing and we're not. What's going on? It's like, well, they've got something going on behind closed doors that you're not. It's called the sales process. Mm-hmm. It's a huge issue. I mean, I will tell you, if I could pick one magical thing that I could wave over on my customers and people that we meet, it would be that. We're a sales culture. We close transactions.
So it's a sales process, which means it's a business process, which means that everybody listening to this has the skills and the ability to processize that process, right? A business process, typically for most of the people that are watching, relates to operations, right? And this goes back to the identity of being a technician. I am a plumber, I am a shoe cobbler, I am a property manager. The focus on the quality and the service of the thing, as opposed to the ancillary activities like sales and marketing that actually make the business grow. And it goes back to that misguided belief of, if you build it, they will come. If you have the best quality service, you will win. And these are wives' tales. This is not true, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, the business that is the best, most effectively marketed, that has the best sales culture and sales organization, even if they are struggling with quality, will win, because they will be able to use growth to compensate and fix problems in other areas. And any company or organization that has a well dialed in sales and marketing process, you know that they're going to have a good operational practice as well. So it's definitely not the sort of thing where you're thinking, man, I've got to go to a seminar, I've got to start acting like Tony Robbins, or thinking like, you know, a sales guru. That's not what we're talking about, right? You're not even talking about like the soft side of being, you know, really slick and polished. You're talking about just like basic SOP kind of stuff, correct?
Well, I mean, absolutely. Actually, you know, the what I'll call, I guess the classic idea of what people think in terms of salespeople is actually the opposite of what you want to do. It doesn't really actually work very well. So I can relieve people of that burden. We're definitely not talking about being slick or talking a lot. In fact, we have people that I listen to on the phone that do that, and that's a failing strategy. People are not interested in that. It's not effective. So, but separately than that, yeah, it's simple blocking and tackling. I mean, it drives me nuts to have a small customer that has a phone call that goes to an answering machine. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. It's just not. If you are small, pick the doggone phone up. I mean, I will tell you this, because I've literally listened to thousands of calls and I've answered hundreds of calls myself just this calendar year. And I will tell you, one of the things I tell customers is, you know, I'm here so you don't have to leave a name on an answering machine. Universally, they said, thank you so much. I hate answering machines. Now, you think, okay, that's stupid, check, whatever. Is it? I'm sorry. It's just not that hard to do. Pick the phone up. That makes you different, really different. Treat them, because what they feel like is like, this is treating me like a human being. This is what my first experience is, so maybe this is what my future experience is. If your first experience is, hey, this took me 2 minutes to leave a message, and I'm not sure, because that's a failing strategy, because people don't think they're going to call back because they've got all this history in their brain. If I leave a message, I'm probably only going to get called back 1 out of 3 times anyway. So a lot of times they don't leave a message, but if they do, it's just, oh man, if this is how we are on the first date, what's it going to be like later? You know, they're trying to sell service.
Yeah, and it's like, why wait? Why would you wait for somebody to call you back? Why wouldn't you just call the next person on the list?
Yeah, and that is what happens. And the challenge is, I hear people talk, they're concerned that it doesn't scale. You know, I can't spend my time talking to these people. It's like, if you've got 50 or 100 doors, what's more important?
What could possibly be more important?
I'm sorry, but everything else costs money. I mean, this is what makes the money. And you may not like to sell, so I want to talk about one other aspect of this. Is a popular solution is the BDM solution. And I'm not anti-BDM. I'm not being a smart aleck about it. But a lot of owners want to kind of outsource the worry and have a BDM magically take care of the problem. And that may happen, but it might not. you might hire, I mean, BDM is just, to me, a fancy way of saying a salesperson that does a few extra things in the property management industry, and that's fine. I mean, if you're not into selling, that's great. The owner doesn't have to sell, I get it. But you better know how to evaluate whether they're actually selling. I mean, just because you outsource the problem doesn't mean you solve the problem, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so,
yeah, no, absolutely. One thing that I talk about is the secretary strategy, meaning getting over this hump of thinking that only I can sell. I know my product or service better than anybody else, right? That's small, backwards-minded thinking. The truth is you're replaceable, and if not, you don't have a business, you have an income. You are replaceable, and so as a result of that, if you can work down your organization, and this is the way that LeadSimple works, by the way, but if you can say, I am right here, I'm the most competent person to do sales, you know, you may or may not be. Below that would be somebody else operationally that interfaces with customers, and then eventually there's going to be, no matter how far you get, there's going to be somebody that is the lowest, least qualified person in the organization to respond. And if you haven't trained downwards and that you're not leveraging the capacity of that lowest tier individual, you're probably making a mistake, because you're probably having calls go to voicemail or calls get unanswered when they could be, not because your front desk person isn't necessarily going to be a great salesperson, but they're capable of saying, hey, I just wanted to call you back immediately and let you know we received your contact. We care. We're grateful that you reached out. I want to let you know that Dave is going to be calling you soon. Can we go ahead and schedule a time for him to have a conversation when it works best for you? Anybody can do that.
Yeah,
That's it.
I mean, okay, let me just lay this really crazy business principle on you, golden rule. I mean, who likes calling people and not having the phone answered? Like nobody, right? So be that person where they call, it's like, oh, I mean, I got people like, oh, I'm talking to a real person. I didn't expect that. You know, be that person that surprises them. And I agree. I think that's a great strategy. Like, okay, this person can't sell. I mean, because that's all. When I answer the customer's phone calls right now, I don't sell anybody anything. I just say, hey, I'm just a warm body here, but they love it because what they call for is they want to check it off the list. They want to feel like, okay, I put the ball in somebody else's court. I made some progress here. And an answering machine doesn't give them that warm fuzzy. A human being does.
Yeah, so let's talk about some more insurgent strategies. One of the things that I want to talk about is the endurance battle. So when we talk about things that insurgent armies, these are smaller native forces versus larger invading forces, the types of strategies that those less equipped insurgents can use, one of them is raw endurance, and that can look like a couple of different things. That could look like, for example, you might see historically in warfare insurgents that will attack very frequently. So with a very high cadence of attack, historically you have large army, post up in a field, wait around for the right time, the right weather, and then full on, it's a big event. As opposed to the guerrilla, you know, if you think back to the War for American Independence, you have folks that start doing things like completely rejecting on-field combat and hiding in the trees, doing sneak attacks, attacking frequently. Some of the benefits of these things are that it is disorienting. You don't know where it's coming, and psychologically, it puts that larger force on check to not know when the attack is going to come, and it's a huge point of advantage. So one principle here is just that endurance battles favor the insurgent. The insurgent is more willing to engage in high frequency, lower wage attacks, whereas a larger organization, to be able to coordinate and move, is much slower. So they want a smaller number of larger impact battles. Can you think of any other historical examples of where we see this kind of nimbleness?
I'll tell a story from a book that I'm reading that I would recommend. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And I'm in Seattle, and they are, I'm a Seahawks fan, although this year, I'm feeling sad. But they brought her in to talk to the Seahawks players about grit. She's written I don't know if you call it, seminal book on persistence and what you're talking about endurance, but it's a good read, definitely. And there's a story that really captured my attention. This is, this is 1940 at Harvard. they grabbed 130 sophomores at Harvard, and they wanted to try to determine over a long period of time what factors they could isolate that led to success. And so they ran them through a battery of tests, and they actually followed up with these people for over 40 years. And maybe it's even longer than that. It's the longest single personal development experiment in that field's history as far as personal development and success. And so they checked in every 2 years to see, try to figure out, okay, how are you doing? What's your life doing? How much money are you making? All these different sorts of things. And what they tried to then reverse engineer, go all the way back to the battery of tests they gave them at the very beginning when they were 20 and a sophomore at Harvard, and try to figure out, okay, what factor back here most strongly correlates to the people that were successful 40 years later and had success over time. Tracking with me so far about that?
Yeah,
that was
absolutely,
the experiment that they set up, right? Yep. So here was the factor they came up with. One of the tests they gave them was a treadmill run. It was intended to be impossible. They put the treadmill at a pitch like this. They ran it harder than they could. It was impossible to complete in 5 minutes. Basically everybody gave up before 5 minutes. That was the point. Now, they factored in and they kept track of how long it took before somebody got off the treadmill. Some people only went for 30 seconds and they just said, screw this. Other people just beat themselves bloody because it was 5 minutes. I'm going to get there in 5 minutes. And, most of them didn't make it. Some of them got close, I think. They isolated that as the most predictive factor of success later in life was their ability to stay on that treadmill.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
That's amazing.
And so she has isolated this factor as, we know it. That's why we're inspired by Rocky stories. That's why Abraham Lincoln's story of failing at the presidency and being bankrupt and then finally coming back and becoming this amazing president. That's why it inspires us, because we secretly know down deep that there's something in all of us if we would just stick with it. Passion's a part of it, but what it does, and this I think relates back to our conversation here, people are afraid that the other people against them are just too talented. They just got too many guns. And the reality is if you are willing to stick with something over time, you can, surprising amount of time, you can just literally outlast people just by being a tough SOB. Mm. And so I would say, back to your, Revolutionary War illustration, those guys, they were, it's famous, right? They were in tatters. They didn't have shoes. They didn't have food, but what they had persistence and passion. That was it. They wanted freedom and they couldn't be held back. And so if you've got that, if you've got that passion in your heart that you really want to grow a business and you're willing to just take like Rocky 50 punches and you're just going to keep dragging your butt up and once again take more punches, I bet on you. I think that's a good small market strategy.
Yeah, so grit combined with the intelligence of knowing your numbers, seeing what's working, what's not, making informed strategies. But as long as you're learning and you are actually getting something out of failure and you're getting better, not just mindlessly failing, that's the circumstance in which grit is inevitably the path to success, as long as you're learning from failure. And as you're saying this is kind of reminding me, I have a sister that's looking to switch careers, and she got a great offer for a position at a new company. It's sales related, and it would be a big step up for her. And she's a little bit worried about her ability to make the leap. She doesn't know if it's really within her grasp. It would be a reach, and she's wondering if it's 6 inches beyond her furthest reach. And what I told her was, because she specifically articulated, I'm not quite sure if I'm smart enough for this. And what I told her was, hey, we know you're not a rocket scientist, right? Like, we've already established you're not exceptionally intelligent. You're not mental level, and neither am I. So what? That's okay. That's clearly not a disqualifying factor in life at all. Being average is a great starting place for doing excellent things. But if you're betting on your will, and you know that going head to head, you will break someone purely by them tapping out before you, that's a good kind of long-term life strategy, just to know that if I have nothing else but my will, which is free and nobody can take from you, it's something you can take to the bank. So I think that's a huge point of encouragement for small businesses that feel like, well, I can't run all these big ads. I can't hire a big staff. Grinding out what's up here is going to make a big difference in the long haul. I'm going to get this book right now. I'm on Amazon with one click. Angela Duckworth, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Boom, I just one click that. I just dropped that in my Kindle. That looks like a fantastic read. In terms of the insurgent metaphor, endurance, speed, a couple of the things that come into mind. The broad category of outbound, right? So when we think about sales, we have outbound, we have inbound. Inbound means you just got handed a lead because somebody filled out a contact form on your website. Outbound means it's cold prospecting. There is not a huge amount of cold prospecting that takes place in this industry. You see some people doing it, calling furbos, some people going into real estate agents' offices, or calling them cold. But particularly when I hear those strategies, I hear it being done by companies early. Like, yeah, man, when I first started off, I just had to just grind it out, just beat on doors. Well, do you still do it? No. I mean, eventually I got some traction and I don't have to do that anymore. Well, the truth is, if that stuff works, it works. But that's effectively professionally hearing no for a living. For most people, that's not an exciting prospect. What are your thoughts on calling for rent by owner prospects and beating the streets, talking to realtors to try and build referral relationships? How do you think about potential channels?
Well, I mean, I think there are more effective things to do, but I think when we're talking about, when I'm talking about the bigger picture, except when you look at it from the perspective that we have been, which is that you're trying to also develop an effort muscle and a persistence muscle. So sometimes the benefit you get is not the actual lead, but it's, I can take a punch and I learned about the customer and I'm going in there. And I mean, luck favors the people that are out there in the mix. So, I mean, honestly, anything that you do at scale is going to work on one level. I mean, if you want to rent a helicopter and drop flyers out of it, flying over Seattle with property management services offered, you're going to probably get some clients sooner or later, right? And so, I mean, I've gone door to door as a real estate agent before. Literally got in a suit, went door to door. Now, did I like doing that? I did not love doing that. But honestly, it's actually a strategy. I mean, to this day, who is it? Financial, is it A.G. Edwards? I'm trying to remember. There's actually a stock market firm that's their strategy. They sell local opportunities for the guys. And I had a guy last week come to my front door, knocking. Oh, hi, I'm the guy who could manage your stock portfolio. And here I am at your front door. And you think, well, that's the dumbest thing ever. Really, is it? Because one, I immediately saw who you were. There was a human interaction. B, nobody really does it anymore, right? It's like mailing a letter. Who gets a personalized letter anymore, right? And so in that situation, you're putting yourself. So, I mean, you can do it with real estate agents. Real estate agents run into people all the time. So if you hustle and go out there and meet a bunch of real estate agents, give them a reason, like, oh, we'll pay you a referral fee, they're going to refer some business to you, right? And so that's just pure hustle again. Is it the thing you want to be doing as an owner long term? Yeah, probably not. I mean, there's probably things that are more effective in the overall scheme of things, but I don't think if you've got 50 doors, I'd be doing anything. Because that's free. Go on Craigslist, see who's a for rent by owner, see if you can engage them in some way. I don't know if you want to just call them up and say, hey, I could rent your property out. You might want to offer them something of value. You know, could I help you find out? I'm not selling anything. I'm just trying to be here in case you ever need me. Could I offer a free rental analysis? Could I offer you some free signs? Could I plug you into my advertising network and help you publicize your property or something, some little angle you could do? And you're gonna win a percentage of those, because we all know for rent by owners are gonna fail a lot of times, realistically.
Right. So the point here is that it represents a blue ocean channel. It represents the concept of not playing the bigger guys game. It's a leader strategy as opposed to a follower strategy, something that other people are not willing to do, in part, in this case, because it's unpleasant. Other things that would fall into that category could be networking and events. You know, there's a gal in your neck of the woods that has made her bones going to foreclosure auctions. That's been a big part of her strategy. Cass Rose. That's the sort of thing where you got to show up, and it may not be thrilling, and you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to, you know, be willing to actually do something proactively, not expect that you're going to show up and people are just going to start handing you your business cards. But by doing things like consistently where other competitors aren't. Another example that comes to mind would be doing office visits with realtors to where you're actually presenting some value-added information. When you think about like outbound prospecting with realtors, the lowest tier would be phone calls, right? So you're just taking, you find a list of 1,000 realtors, you're just banging through the phones one after the other. And that's probably something you would outsource. A step up from that would be going into the offices, shaking hands, bringing in a box of donuts. A step up from that would actually be having a value-added informational session. You're buying lunch for the office, you're getting people to sit in. So wherever in that food chain makes the most sense, those are probably situations where you're not going to find a ton of other companies that are competing in that medium, because it requires physical effort, persistence, and it's relational. And relationships represent a long-term, long-game strategy that most companies in your market will always refuse to do. Everybody's always going to be focused on the near term, what's right in front of my face, whereas long-term, long-game strategies, there's always going to be a ton of blue ocean. So if you anchor towards long-term plays, you know, playing the long game, which is kind of my overall business philosophy, there's always going to be room there. Fair?
Absolutely. I mean, I was actually inspired by the example person you talked to, you know, here locally. She built her entire business on that one strategy. She would literally go to foreclosure auctions the night before when they put the property, and she would just sit there and they want to know, what is this property going to rent for? And she could rattle it off the top of her head. And so they came to trust her over time. She built her entire business on that one idea, period. Oh, we lost Jordan. Okay. I guess this is only me. Let's see if I got something I can talk about here, for example. Let's see. Hang on, folks. Jordan will be back. If there's any, yep, sure. If there's questions, I see. Yes, Zach, I see you. So, yep, I can hear you guys. Well, I can't hear. I don't know where Jordan is. Yes, Jordan's asking if you guys can still hear us. So would somebody write in the chat if you can hear me talk at least? Okay, great, perfect. Okay, they can hear me talk, so I'm just going to answer questions. So fire them into the chat box. And I'll okay, Zach, some value-add items for other people like attorneys. Hey, Jordan.
Hey,
you're back. So those are great ideas. People like accountants, referrers. I mean, I would consider those the referral sources. Attorneys are a unique animal. So I mean, I got attorneys in my family, and they're bound by certain rules. So there's things you can't really do, and they also tend to be confident. I'll put it that way. And so maybe not seeing. So you have to figure out a way to actually get in their world. And I don't know exactly what that would be, other than if they handled real estate transactions, and you could offer some way for them to help their customers assess the value of, like an estate, for example. You know, what's the property worth? What could you sell it for? If you became their go-to person for that, that would make sense. Like an estate attorney, a probate attorney, something like that. Yep, Cassandra Rose. Yep. Yep, estates, exactly. Estates, probate, things like that. They need a go-to person. And so if you went out to those people and said, hey, if you've got an estate and it's got real estate involved with it, I'm your guy. I will tell you what the costs are associated with it. I will give you a special you know, if the people that own the real estate want to sell it, I can offer them a preferred rate, or I can I've got a referral network where I can refer you to 3 of the best realtors. and I can tell you what it would rent for if you want to rent, that sort of thing. Any other questions?
Yeah, another thing to think about is that anytime that you're in a good niche, doing your research, creative ads, creative copy, creative is a huge component of the overall strategy for standing out. So when we talk about things that are going to move the needle with conversion rates, a sales process is a huge part of that. Your positioning, your sales collateral, the actual service, but also just brand. And what is brand? Brand is effectively the emotional sentiments that somebody has towards you and what you're talking about and how what you're offering makes them feel. So with the estate attorney category, there are obviously some pretty strong emotional levers that can be used and fine-tuned that can take us away from here's a raw bullet point list of services and here's a bullet point list of emotional outcomes that we can either help you secure or avoid. So by focusing on those things and finding ways that other people have done that through creative ads and copy, that's something to think about as well. I recommend go Google whatever the verbiage is, estate attorney ads, go to image search, find creative ads, look at many of them until you're tired of it. You'll find some interesting stuff that you can definitely lift and remix and reincorporate. So which the bullet point there being creative is a meaningful differentiator that smaller players can use that oftentimes large players aren't even willing to do so because they feel like they have this established brand that they don't want to, tarnish or deviate from. Zach also says a really cheap email we do is a congrats on your new lease listing to real estate agents. It hits home well and they share our contact often. Interesting. Okay. Interesting strategy.
Sure. Those are just simple things, right?
Onboarding would be another example of it. We're gonna have to wrap up here soon, but that's just one of the things that I would mention is that as we've talked about the marketing, the sales piece, what about past the sales piece, right? After you actually sign the contract. Some people think of, all we're doing there is just servicing. It's just nothing but service. But the truth is focusing on retention, focusing on customer satisfaction, leveraging things like whether it be a net promoter score, celebrating a customer anniversary. That initial onboarding phase of, the first 2 weeks is really, really important to establish a really strong connection. And then making sure that 1 year, 2 years out, people are still with you, right? Because what is the number one driver of losing customers? It's apathy. People just feel nothing. It's not that they hate you, they don't really feel anything. And so when competing offering comes along, it's very easy for them to get picked off. So onboarding and retention is definitely something that doesn't get a lot of airtime, but is important as well.
Well, one other thing I would just add to that mix is if you've got 50 doors, you've got 50 opportunities to ask for referrals from your existing owners. For other properties they might own or other people they might know. So if you have a referral program that incentivizes them some ways to care, you've also got tenants in those properties and they know people. And or if you are a company that doesn't just do property management, you do brokerage sorts of things, it's a gold mine of potential people that might want to buy a home. And then you can also then find another person to put back and replace those people, because those people are, if you show them a way, they want to go buy a home. I mean, and there's some amazing stuff out there. Home Partners of America will take people with 500 credit scores as renters. I mean, it's a rent-to-own program, and I don't know why more people don't do that to help their tenants out. So anyway, there's something that's harvestable, even if you got 50 or 100 doors, is I guess my point.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and bring things to a close here. Thanks for you guys attending. Shout out to Zach Ettinger, who is, I know, going to be at the PM Growth Summit. Zach, I saw you bought a ticket to that, so I salute you for that. Look forward to seeing you guys in January for that. Mike, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be with us. This was helpful, I think. Hopefully people got some value to kind of stimulate that thought about the soft side, the intangibles that they can use. We do have something coming up here soon. We are going to be releasing a master class, which is basically a video course of some of the content and the materials that are talked about in the book written by Mike and Dylan called Make It Ring. Really excited about that. That's coming up soon, and you guys will be hearing more about it in the near term. Mike, if folks want to get in touch with you and just kind of continue the conversation, learn a little bit more about what you do, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, they can email me at mike@geekrealestatemarketing.com, or we've got a website, geekrealestatemarketing.com. Either one.
Perfect. I'm dropping the email address here, and the website I'm dropping too. Perfect. Hey, guys, thanks again for attending. We wish you well and much success with your business. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks.